I think this might be one of my top 5 favorite Sundays with Subscribers interviews we've ever done for a couple reasons. But I had a guy on the show named Andrew Constantino, and Andrew is like the opposite of me. His life has been on a totally different trajectory, but he was an Antifa activist, far leftist, was homeless, was drug addicted, all of these things. And he has now had I would call it a red pilling. An epiphany about not only his former life as an activist and what is happening with Antifa right now, but also about the failures to deal with homelessness in Washington state and really elsewhere in the nation. That's the space he works in right now as an outreach worker with homelessness. And he's so fed up with it, he is almost ready to fully buy into President Donald Trump's plan to disband Housing First and harm reduction. This segment is brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. All right, so of course, just to revisit it quickly, President Donald Trump came out. He signed an executive order to defund, to the extent that they can, Housing First, which is the idea that a lot of West Coast cities push that, oh, let's take these drug-addicted homeless people and just drop them into a house and everything will be fine. And it's not fine. The executive order also tries to defund, again, to the extent possible, because all they could really handle is federal funds, this harm reduction model where let's spend money basically helping people get high, which is just, in my opinion, assisted suicide. It also gets into this idea that even some Democrats are starting to get on board with, this idea of involuntary commitment and trying to get some of these people who are truly a threat to themselves and others committed long enough to be able to actually make a difference in their lives. So after this executive order came out, there was a guy named Andrew Constantino who is a homeless outreach worker. He penned an op-ed in the Seattle Times basically saying, hey, this Housing First and harm reduction stuff, here's why it's not working. And so we invited him on the show and we talked about a couple things. I'll get to his former life as Antifa in a moment because, man, that was fascinating. But he's like a recovering leftist. And now that he's worked in this space, especially as someone who spent years, on and off again homeless, on and off again using drugs, and working in this space and really seeing what people need, I asked him about President Donald Trump's executive order. And I will say, even knowing he's had a bit of a red pilling, I was kind of surprised by his answer. So do you agree with President Trump's executive order?
Oh, Lord. Yes. And I would say...
Is that hard for you to say? You want to get through this together? You want me to hold your hand? Is it fine?
Yeah, Antifa's going to be waiting for me outside.
Yes, okay.
Well, I think it's a problem where we just look at MAGA or Trump and it's like, this is the devil, and everything they do is wrong. Have you read it? Just read what it says. Mm-hmm. And it is very reasonable. It is not beyond the pale. And there's plenty of flexibility and room for us to make it work, in our own Seattle way. So, yeah, I think it is a good thing.
What about the involuntary commitment aspect? It's something we've talked about locally for sure. Do you believe we need to ramp up involuntary commitment?
Well, yes. And I'll say that, it's like for some people, it's, it's a mental health issue. It's not like them using methamphetamine, but back in the 90s, I'm smoking methamphetamine. And, like I told you, I'm out on Aurora, stripped naked, being chased by shadow people, literally. And I was a mess back then. I don't know how it worked. All I know is that when 2 of my friends called, I was involuntarily held for 72 hours. And they made sure that I was healthy. I calmed down. I stabilized. They asked my friends a bunch of questions. Is this normal behavior? Is this drug related? And then I had to have a conversation with one of their counselors to get myself out. Basically, I had to pass a sanity check, And then they released me with one of my friends and they gave them, here's a list of advice. He's like, oh, I had to take every knife in the house and set it outside the house. They were like, your friend is dangerous.
Yep.
And they were like, but if he has another episode, then you talk to us again. So I go through all that. Whereas now, on a regular basis, I care about their well-being, but I also care about the community's well-being. Yeah. And I have clients that are recklessly using methamphetamine, and they are putting themselves in such a manic state. They are dangerous.
Yeah, and we all know that, right? I mean, and how can you not be a danger to yourself when you're like folded over on a street corner in downtown Seattle near death? It's just mind-boggling to me. And so we need to continue to have these conversations about when is involuntary commitment appropriate. And we don't want to go back to the days of like locking up Granny. I always talk about that. And, you know, I'll lock up Granny, take everything she owns. You know, it has to be a process, right, that's appropriate. And so, but, you know, how can we not say that these people are a threat to themselves or a threat to other people? And one of the things I appreciate about Andrew is, you know, I hope he doesn't lose his job for coming on our show, certainly. But, you know, he's about nuance. And in nuance, this is a complex crisis. And different people need different things. And there's people who need treatment. There's people who need involuntary commitment. And yes, there are people who need a roof over their head. There are. And he and I talked about that. You know, people who are, for instance, really elderly or frail or sick, who, you know, throwing them into some sort of environment like a emergency shelter situation, you know, they're probably going to die there. Like they need something a little more stable, a little more quickly. But that's the problem, is that the West Coast is like completely unable to look at this with nuance. Like, no, just put them all in a house. Like, let's build housing. Let's build affordable housing. And no matter what ails them, let's just shove them into an apartment and see what happens. And it's just ridiculous. And so he's someone who very clearly wants to help people. He wants to save people's lives. He cares about these people he works with on the street. And so for him, even as a recovering leftist, he's willing to work with Donald Trump if it means saving people's lives. Imagine that. Like, yes, I'll work with Donald Trump. Yes, some of his ideas are not bad ideas. And I think that, to me, that's the sign of an honest operator, is someone who can put their dislike for Donald Trump aside long enough to actually read what he's proposing and to say, hey, some of these ideas aren't terrible. We should do some of these things. But then, of course, you got West Coast leaders who they won't work with Donald Trump on anything. They would literally rather see people die in filth and squalor and despair than dare work with Donald Trump. And that's pretty horrible. Like, that's pretty awful. So I appreciate Andrew's willingness to just say, like, look, politics, all this stuff aside, we've got to help these people because he used to be one of them. So the other thing, of course, we talked about, look, I have been public enemy number one from Antifa in Seattle for many years. I don't think I am anymore. I would say I'm public enemy, maybe 2 or 3. But poor Jonathan Cho and Katie Davis Court, they're out there all the time. I really think that they've got it worse than me right now. But back in the day, for sure. And I've had quite a few run-ins with Antifa. I've been assaulted a number of times. And so come to find out, Andrew Constantino used to be a member of Antifa. And I was like, you know, it was such a fascinating, like, imagine me sitting next to a member of Antifa sort of hashing it out. And so I had to talk to him about, you know, that, and go back to 2020 and my crew and all these things, and sort of why he was willing, as a member of Antifa who surely did not like me, how he got to the point where he could sit across from me having a great conversation. So you've known me,
yes.
Of me, right?
Yes.
Back in the 2020 days.
Yeah, and I would have considered you, I don't know, maybe the enemy, you know, kind of like a propagandist. And now I love your show.
And I love... See, I'm not so bad, right? Did you ever assault me in wearing you brought with you?
Oh, my mask here.
He brought, because he thought I'd enjoy it, the mask he used to wear as Antifa.
Here you go.
Stop it right this second.
See, you know,
would you assault journalists wearing that mask?
Has a bunny ears? No, you know, it's because that's what's gone wrong. It's about, it's definitely an element of it. It's about intimidating people who would do violence.
Right.
But now it's turned into doing the violence. It's like, you're doing the thing, dude.
Right.
You know, you're supposed to be a defender, and, like, you know, people that you see that might be trying to do violence to others, like some kind of right wing, you know, like troublemakers, you're supposed to stand against them and make them scared. But now it's completely flipped. It's like, no, you're the ones who are assaulting people.
Harassing, intimidating,
it's
silencing. It's really wild.
Like screaming at people.
How did
Go
you...
kill yourself.
Are you going to kill yourself tonight to be a good boy? It would be so beautiful to see our bodies hanging from the trees, swinging back and forth.
Yeah.
I can't believe their messaging. You know, it actually completely stuns me. You know, when they, like I said, they're screaming at people, what, have you thought about going to kill yourself?
Yeah.
Why don't you go kill yourself? I'm like, that's what you're saying? Like, what do you represent at that point?
Yeah. They don't represent anything. And I think that's what he realized, right? Is I mean, to be out there saying such horrible things, committing acts of violence, like, you're the fascists. You know, using fear and intimidation to shut people up and to shut down dissent, you're the fascists. You are far closer to the Nazis and Hitler, you know, you want to call me Nazi, whatever, and Hitler, but you're far closer to what Hitler was trying to accomplish in this, like, very narrow-minded, everyone must agree with me and we will shut down dissent by any means possible. So I was just tickled that Andrew's had a little bit of a red pilling, but that it made me feel good to say, I used to think you were the enemy and now I love your show. See, you guys, changing hearts and minds.
There's hope.
This is the reason we call this show Undivided, as divided as I do feel at times. So we loved having Andrew on. Smart guy. I'm glad he's doing this work. I'm glad people like him are down trying to help the homeless in places like Seattle. So if you want to catch that full interview, you can become a subscriber to Undivided and catch all of our editions of Sundays with Subscribers, our exclusive Sunday show. Go to undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com, and just click on the banner that says support the show. Paid subscribers like you guys are the way that we're able to continue to do the show, and we have a lot of fun. All right, that segment was brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. Make sure you sign up for their newsletter to be alerted to opportunities to do just that. Again, future42.org.